Do you think those strange figures you sometimes glimpse from the corner of your eye are just tricks of the light? What if I told you that for over a century, people across America have been documenting encounters with something they weren't supposed to see, something that official records have systematically erased? Tonight, I'm going to reveal the suppressed history of what we now call the Tall Man. They don't want you to know this story. Entire archives have been scrubbed, witnesses have disappeared. But some documents survived, hidden away by those brave enough to preserve the truth. I've spent years collecting these fragments, piecing together what might be the most disturbing pattern of unexplained phenomena in American history. It begins in 1891, Greylock County, Massachusetts. A severe winter storm had isolated the mining town of Addison Hollow for nearly 3 weeks. When supplies finally arrived on February 9th, the delivery team found the town eerily quiet. No smoke from chimneys, no footprints in the fresh snow. The official report claimed a typhoid outbreak had forced evacuation. But that doesn't explain what the supply team's leader, Jonathan Mercer, wrote in his personal journal that night. Found the church full of townspeople, all seated facing the altar, all deceased, no signs of violence or illness. Their eyes were open, every single one fixed on the same corner of the ceiling. Dr. Phillips says they've been dead at least a week, yet no decomposition. Something else. Every mirror in town has been covered with cloth or smashed. The Addison Hollow incident was quickly contained. Mercer's journal was confiscated by a government agency that, according to official records, didn't even exist until 1947. The bodies were cremated within 24 hours. The town was abandoned, later flooded for a reservoir project. But Mercer had sent a letter to his brother describing what he'd found. That letter resurfaced in 1967 in an estate sale. By then, there had been others. April 1912. The same week the Titanic sank, drawing all newspaper attention. 5 patients at the Westover Sanatorium in rural Pennsylvania reported seeing an unusually tall figure standing in the hallway outside their rooms. All described the same details: impossibly thin, dark suit, no discernible facial features, arms that hung too low. Each patient reported the figure would remain completely motionless, then suddenly be closer when they blinked. Within 3 days, all 5 patients were dead. Cause of death listed as heart failure, despite none having previous cardiac issues. The attending physician, Dr. Eleanor Reed, noted in her private correspondence that each deceased patient had an expression of profound terror and peculiar elongated bruising on their forearms, as if gripped by extremely large hands. The sanatorium's director dismissed Dr. Reed's concerns. The deaths were attributed to complications from tuberculosis. 3 weeks later, Dr. Reed herself disappeared after staying late to review patient files. Her car was found parked at the sanatorium, keys still in the ignition. She was never seen again. The pattern continued. 1918, 1924, 1933, always remote locations, always multiple witnesses, always followed by death or disappearance, always quickly explained away by authorities, always with mirrors removed or broken at the scene. The encounters stayed isolated, contained to disconnected incidents with no obvious links, until the summer of 1944. Camp Silverwood was a Boy Scout summer camp in northern Michigan. On July 17, 1944, Scout leader Martin Donovan led a group of 7 boys, ages 12 to 14, on an overnight hiking trip. Only Donovan returned. His statement to authorities claimed the boys had wandered off in different directions despite his instructions to stay together. Search parties found no trace of the missing scouts. But the diary of 13-year-old Thomas Beck tells a different story. The diary wasn't part of the official investigation. It was found 3 decades later, hidden in the walls during a renovation of the Beck family home. The final entries describe what really happened at Camp Silverwood. July 16th, saw it again tonight, standing between the trees watching our campfire. Mr. Donovan says I'm imagining things, but Peter saw it too. It's so tall it has to bend its head under the branches. July 17th. We're leaving after breakfast. Something happened to Mr. Donovan last night. He went to use the latrine and came back different, keeps staring at nothing and smiling. Told us we're taking a shortcut home today through the North Woods. Peter reminded him that's the opposite direction from camp. Mr. Donovan just smiled wider. The final entry is a single line, written in shaky handwriting. It's following us. Mr. Donovan is leading us to it. The official investigation concluded with a tearful press conference from Martin Donovan, who claimed the trauma of losing his scouts had affected his memory of events. He resigned from the Scouts and moved to Oregon. 12 years later, a hiker found his body in the Cascades. The coroner noted his expression was frozen in a state of extreme terror, and that all reflective surfaces in his cabin had been covered with black paint. The incidents multiplied during the 1950s. The same descriptions appeared in disconnected reports across the country. Unusually tall, thin, dark suit, featureless face, arms too long for its body. Witnesses reported the entity would appear motionless at a distance, then suddenly be closer without any perceived movement. Many described a sensation of being watched for days before the actual sighting. Then came the Stillwater incident of 1963, the first case to break into mainstream awareness briefly, before being methodically discredited and erased. Stillwater Elementary School, October 1963. A third-grade teacher, Ms. Patricia Lane, was reviewing her students' artwork when she noticed a disturbing pattern. Of 27 children, 22 had drawn the same figure in their My Dream assignment, an unnaturally tall, thin figure in dark clothing. Several children had depicted it standing beside their beds. When questioned, the children gave nearly identical descriptions of the tall man who would visit them at night, standing in the corners of their rooms or at the foot of their beds. Parents were alarmed. The school principal, Walter Griffin, called an emergency meeting. That same night, 2 children disappeared from their homes, Cody Matheson and Emma Ridley. No signs of forced entry, beds empty, windows locked from inside. 3 days later, trail hikers found the children sitting beneath a large oak tree 6 miles from town. They appeared physically unharmed but severely dehydrated. When interviewed separately, both children gave identical accounts. The tall man took us to see his home. It's very dark there. He wants to take everyone. The story attracted national attention. Reporters descended on Stillwater. Walter Griffin appeared on local television, showing the disturbing artwork and pleading for an investigation. Then, abruptly, everything stopped. The newspapers retracted their stories. Griffin issued a statement claiming the incident had been an elaborate prank orchestrated by older students. The children's drawings were attributed to the influence of a local ghost story. Griffin resigned the following week and checked himself into a psychiatric hospital, where he died 3 months later from what was officially recorded as acute respiratory failure. A nurse who attended Griffin in his final days later told her daughter that his last coherent words were, "It doesn't walk, it waits until you blink." The Stillwater incident should have exposed everything. Instead, it was systematically erased, yet it marked a turning point. Following 1963, official reports of the entity dropped dramatically, whatever agency had been suppressing. Information had learned from Stillwater. Their containment protocols improved, but they couldn't stop the whispers. Throughout the 1970s, the entity entered urban legend, campfire stories, slumber party tales, always with similar details, despite no mainstream coverage connecting the incidents. Psychologists call this phenomenon collective unconscious. But there's another explanation: the collective memory of actual events persisting despite official erasure. The 1980s brought new technology and new opportunities for documentation. On October 7, 1985, amateur filmmaker Lawrence Keene was testing his new video camera in Oakwood Park, Wisconsin. The footage begins normally: autumn trees, a playground, a walking path. At the 8:42 mark, the camera pans across an empty section of the park, then returns to the same spot. Now there's a figure, standing motionless beside a tree, impossibly tall and thin, wearing what appears to be a dark suit. The camera zooms in, shaking slightly. The figure has no discernible facial features, just smooth, pale blankness where features should be. Keene's voice is heard on the recording, "What the hell's that? Hey, you!" The camera shakes as Keene apparently begins walking toward the figure. It remains perfectly still. Then, the image distorts with tracking errors, common in VHS recordings when the magnetic tape is damaged. When the picture stabilizes 3 seconds later, the figure is suddenly closer to the camera, though no movement was captured. The camera jerks backward. Keene's breathing becomes rapid. The recording ends abruptly. Keene's roommate reported him missing the next day. Police found his apartment empty, but noted something odd in their report. Every mirror in the residence had been shattered. The camera was never recovered. The footage I've described exists because Keene had been showing his roommate how to use the camera's playback feature through their television the previous evening. The roommate had recorded this demonstration using a second VHS camera. That second tape was confiscated by individuals claiming to be FBI agents, according to the roommate. But he had already made a copy, which circulated in underground video trading networks throughout the late 1980s. I've personally viewed this footage. It's since disappeared from every collection I've traced. The copies vanish, hard drives fail, digital versions become corrupted, leaving only the first few minutes intact before the figure appears. The 1990s brought the internet, making information both easier to share and easier to manipulate. The first online references to the tall man appeared on early bulletin board systems around 1994. Accounts from across decades and geographical locations were suddenly connected. Patterns emerged. Common elements became clear. Those discussion threads were systematically deleted. User accounts terminated. Early websites documenting the phenomenon would go offline without explanation. Still, awareness grew. The entity began appearing in popular culture, fictionalized, diluted, transformed into entertainment. The horror genre's many slender, faceless figures in suits might seem like creative invention. Look closer. They're echoes of real accounts, stripped of specific details that might connect them to actual incidents. Fiction becomes the perfect cover for fact. If something is portrayed as entertainment often enough, genuine documentation begins to look like imitation. Consider this. Every major entertainment portrayal of tall, slender entities has been followed by aggressive copyright claims against alleged infringement, even when the supposedly infringing materials predated the copyrighted work. It's not about protecting intellectual property. It's about removing documented evidence by recategorizing it as derivative fiction. Meanwhile, the encounters continued. September 2001. While the world's attention focused on New York and Washington, something happened in the small coastal town of Milverton, Rhode Island. Over 3 consecutive nights, 17 residents reported seeing an unusually tall figure standing motionless on the beach, facing the town. Local police investigated, but found nothing. On the 4th night, power to the entire town failed for approximately 6 hours. When electricity was restored at dawn, 38 residents had vanished from their homes. No signs of struggle, no forced entries, just empty beds and, in every affected household, broken or covered mirrors. The official explanation cited a mass evacuation due to a gas leak, though no gas leak was ever reported by utility companies. The missing residents were said to have relocated voluntarily, declining to provide forwarding addresses. Their names were removed from public records within weeks. Former neighbors who asked too many questions reported being visited by government officials who strongly suggested they focus on moving forward rather than looking back. One Milverton resident, Teresa Carrigan, didn't accept the official story. Her 16-year-old daughter Emily was among the missing. Teresa began collecting accounts from witnesses, building a case to challenge the authorities. 3 months into her investigation, Teresa's house caught fire while she slept. The blaze destroyed all her documentation. Teresa survived, but suffered smoke inhalation that damaged her vocal cords. She abandoned her investigation and moved to Arizona. When contacted in 2017 by independent researchers, she refused to discuss Milverton, writing in her reply, "They're still watching. Please leave me in peace." The pattern accelerated after Milverton. Dixon Lake, Minnesota, 2003. 43 missing. Explained as voluntary relocation due to factory closure. Harrisonville, Georgia, 2005. 26 missing. attributed to flash flooding, though weather records show no precipitation that week. Cooper's Glen, Oregon, 2008, 61 missing, officially. Recorded as evacuation from forest fires that somehow left the town itself untouched. Then, the incidents stopped appearing in any records at all, not because they ceased, but because the containment had become perfect. Total information control, scrubbed databases, altered maps, redirected search results, memory manipulation through coordinated media campaigns. Entire communities erased not just physically, but from collective consciousness. But they made one critical mistake. They assumed digital information was easier to control than physical evidence. In reality, the opposite is true. Digital breadcrumbs persist in cached pages, server backups, and personal archives. The more they deleted, the more obvious the deletions became to those who knew where to look. I've been tracking these digital ghosts for 15 years, mapping the negative spaces, the conspicuous absences of information that should exist. When enough pieces are removed from the historical record, the shape of what's been deleted becomes visible by its absence. Like a photographic negative, the censored truth creates a perfect silhouette of itself. That silhouette led me to a pattern I might never have seen otherwise. The incidents aren't random. They follow a precise geographical progression, moving along invisible lines across the continental United States. When mapped, these lines form a massive symbol, one that's still being completed. Each incident is a point in a vast geometric pattern. Each disappearance adds another line to the drawing. What's being drawn? That's the question that kept me searching. In 2019, I found a partial answer in the sealed academic records of Dr. Elias Thorne, an anthropologist who disappeared in 1972 while researching folklore in the Pacific Northwest. Thorne had documented similar symbols in cave paintings dating back thousands of years. His notes referenced the threshold geometry, patterns that allegedly thin the boundaries between dimensions when completed. Thorne's final journal entry, never published but preserved by his former research assistant. The entity isn't creating the pattern, we are. Our attention is drawing it into our reality, one witness at a time. It cannot fully manifest without sufficient observation. It needs to be seen, it needs to be known, and once the pattern is complete, it won't need individual encounters anymore. It will be here permanently. 2 weeks after writing those words, Thorne vanished from a locked office. The official investigation concluded he had fabricated his disappearance to escape debts. His research was discredited and sealed. His colleagues suddenly had trouble remembering basic details about him, as if his existence itself was being retroactively erased. That erasure continues today. While compiling this account, I've watched my research disappear in real time. Digital files corrupt themselves, physical notes go missing, recorded interviews transform into static. 3 hard drives have failed in 2 months. My emails to former witnesses bounce back from addresses that were working just days earlier. I've received 18 phone calls where no one speaks on the other end, just the sound of rhythmic breathing. The mirrors in my home have begun to show inconsistencies, reflections that move a fraction of a second too slowly, shadows where there shouldn't be any. Last night, I covered every reflective surface with blankets. This morning, the blankets had been removed. I live alone. I know how this sounds. That's their most effective defense, making the truth seem so outlandish that it discredits itself. You're probably thinking this is just another creepy internet story. Fiction masquerading as fact for entertainment value. I understand that skepticism. I'd think the same in your position. But ask yourself, why is information about certain incidents so difficult to find? Why do web searches for specific dates and locations mentioned here redirect to unrelated results? Why have so many historical newspapers from these periods been excluded from digital archives? Why do mapping services show empty fields where documented towns once stood? Don't try to find Addison Hollow on modern maps of Massachusetts. The reservoir story is true, but the timing is suspicious, flooding a town just weeks after an incident requiring total containment. Don't bother searching newspaper archives for the Stillwater Elementary incident. Those articles have been methodically removed, replaced with mundane local news from the same dates. The entity has evolved over the decades. Early accounts describe a passive observer, watching from a distance, appearing to those who noticed it. By the 1960s, it had become more active, approaching victims, influencing their behavior. Recent accounts suggest its power has grown significantly. It no longer needs to physically encounter each victim. Merely learning about it creates a connection, an awareness through which it can reach you. Which brings me to the real reason I'm sharing this information. If you've read this far, you're already part of the pattern now. You're aware of the entity. That awareness creates a thinning, a connection through which it can potentially reach you. I apologize for making you part of this. But there's a purpose. The entity requires silence. Isolated incidents, contained information. By spreading awareness beyond its ability to erase, we might be able to disrupt the pattern, dilute its power through distributed knowledge, like a secret that loses its power when widely known. That's the theory, at least. I can't be certain it will work. But the alternative, continuing to allow isolated incidents in perfect containment, guarantees the pattern will eventually be completed. What happens then? According to Thorne's research, the completed geometric pattern creates a permanent doorway, not just for a single entity, but for whatever exists on the other side of that threshold, a full incursion rather than isolated manifestations. I've taken precautions while creating this account, multiple distribution methods, automated postings scheduled for the coming weeks. If I disappear, the information continues spreading. The more who know, the harder it becomes to contain. Critical mass might be our only defense. There are protection measures you can take. The entity seems unable to manifest in brightly lit areas with multiple witnesses present. It avoids locations with active, continuous video surveillance, not because the recording captures it, but because the act of constant mechanical observation seems to repel it. Most importantly, cover or remove mirrors and reflective surfaces, especially at night. Every documented encounter involves mirrors, either as access points or observation devices. For those asking why I don't provide my real name or credentials, those who have publicly researched the entity while identifying themselves have universally disappeared, their work discredited and erased. Anonymity isn't cowardice, it's survival. I'm not sure how much longer I can continue documenting this. Signs of interference are increasing. Last night, I woke at 3:17 a.m. to find my computer on, though I'd shut it down before sleeping. The document I'm writing now was open, with additions I didn't write. A single line of text repeated, "Stop watching, stop watching, stop watching." But we can't stop watching. That's the paradox. Ignorance allows the pattern to continue in secret. Awareness creates risk but might prevent completion. There's no safe choice. If you've experienced any of the phenomena described here, please share your account. Use anonymous methods. Distribute widely. Don't include identifying details that could make you a target. The entity's containment system is sophisticated, but it relies on identifying and isolating individual sources of information. I should address the skeptics directly. You believe I'm creating fiction for attention. I understand. I would believe the same. But ask yourself, why would I distribute this anonymously if attention were my goal? Why construct an elaborate narrative without personal credit? The simplest explanation is that I'm sharing this because I believe it's true and potentially important for others to know. For those already familiar with elements of this account, you've probably encountered fragments of the story as creepypasta or urban legends. That's by design. Fictional framing is the perfect cover for suppressed truth. When actual documentation emerges, it appears to be imitating the fiction rather than revealing the source material. I've set up secure channels for information exchange, but I won't share those publicly. Those who need to find them will. Those who are merely curious rather than genuinely involved are safer remaining at a distance. The entity's pattern of manifestation has accelerated. Historical records show decades between major incidents, then years. Now, months. The geometric pattern is nearly complete. Whatever threshold is being created, we're approaching its activation. My research suggests one final possibility. The entity isn't creating the pattern. We are, collectively, through observation and awareness. If that's true, then perhaps we can alter the pattern through coordinated observation. Not stopping awareness, but redirecting it. changing what we see and how we interpret it. That's speculation, not confirmed strategy. But it offers a path beyond mere documentation and distribution, active resistance rather than passive witnessing. I've remained awake for 72 hours now. Sleep feels dangerous. During brief moments when exhaustion overcomes me, I dream of tall, thin figures standing in corners, watching, waiting. Last night, during one such microsleep, I heard words, not spoken aloud but present in my consciousness. The door opens both ways. What does that mean? Is the geometric pattern creating an entrance, an exit, or both? Are we witnessing an incursion, or are we being prepared for extraction? The historical accounts provide no clear answer. I'll continue sharing information as long as possible. If this account suddenly ends or changes tone dramatically, assume I'm no longer in control of the information. In that case, disregard any subsequent clarifications or corrections that minimize the account or suggest it was fictional. The entity thrives in ignorance and isolation. Our awareness, fragmented but widespread, might be the only defense against whatever comes next. Look for the pattern, watch for the signs, cover your mirrors, and if you see a tall figure standing motionless in the distance, don't blink. Don't look away, and whatever you do, don't approach it. It's already seen you. It already knows you're watching, and now you're part of the pattern too.